We're going to be painting this fun and freeing abstract face painting today. So here I have everything that I need. I've got my 8x10 size canvas. I'll be painting in portrait today, but you can always turn your canvas around and paint in landscape if you prefer. I have 3 different size brushes. I've got a bigger square shaped brush, a medium sort of round shaped brush, and then a smaller pointy one which I'll be using for all of the details, but please feel free to use any size or shape brushes that you wish. I have some kitchen towel just to dab my brushes on, a cup of water for washing the brushes and also adding a bit of water to our acrylic paint. And then over here I have my paint palette, starting with a lot of titanium white. I then have cadmium red, cadmium yellow deep hue, ultramarine blue, pale olive. I'm going to start just by picking up one of my slightly bigger brushes, scooping up some white paint, just moving it over to an area that's free on my palette. I'm going to start by picking up some red and adding some red to this. Now you can use any colours or shades that you wish for your own painting. Then just adding a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to give this a good mix. I want to start with very warm colours and create almost a few sort of burnt orange shades for the background of my painting. So I'm just mixing this up. Remember that this is your own painting. You can create any shapes that you wish. You don't have to follow along with me. I've just added a little bit of blue and I'm mixing this in with the red. Now this will give us a slightly more burnt orange effect with our paint. I'm just going to pick up a clean brush and add a little bit more of my yellow, just because I want it slightly more of an orange tone rather than a red. Again, mixing up colours is a really fun part of painting, so feel free to experiment with your own creations. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to this, give it a good mix just to make sure that the paint stays nice and fluid. Just adding a tiny bit more blue just to darken it up slightly. And then whenever you're ready, we can move over to our canvas. I'm just doing a very free wave-like shape going up in a diagonal. Then just going to fill it all in. This is the really fun, freeing part of this painting because we're just going to spend a while just creating our background, adding in our different colours, adding in the different shapes. There's no right or wrong with this. I like to just sort of let my brush do its thing. It helps you to switch the mind off and can be very meditative and relaxing. Now I'm going to mix up my next colour. So I'm just picking up some of the shade I've already got and I'm lightening it slightly by adding some white paint and just mixing it in. I just want a shade or 2 shades slightly lighter. Adding a little bit more yellow to it as well. Just giving it a good mix. Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and add this to your canvas. So I'm just going to add this in the same sort of way. I'm just adding a wave-like line in a diagonal going up. Then just going to fill it in. I'm going to leave a small gap between this colour and my first colour just to allow my first shade to dry slightly before I bring this all the way up to meet it. If you'd like to leave a little gap between your 2 colours, you can also do that. It also looks quite nice. Gives it a bit of a pop. Totally up to you. Just decide whatever you want to do for your own painting. If you want to paint the sides, I would do this as you go along. So just wrap these colours around the sides and the top and the bottom of your canvas. I'm now just carefully dragging my brush along that line, just bringing this paint colour up to meet the other shade. It doesn't matter if it blends out slightly, we can always go back with that first shade once the paint is dry and add it on top. Now I'm going to mix up my third shade. So I'm just adding a little bit of white next to my previous colour and mixing it in with the paint that's left on my brush. Now this will give me an even lighter tone. Just going ahead and adding this to the canvas. Now I'm going to leave a little gap between this colour and my last colour because I want to come back later and add a slightly cooler tone with a bluey green shade. So I'm just leaving a gap. I've added a tiny bit more yellow to this just to brighten it up ever so slightly. So feel free to amend your colours as you go. You can always paint over the top like I've done here. At this stage of the painting, just enjoy the process. Next up, I'm going to mix my fourth colour, so picking up some more white. I'm doing exactly the same thing, just adding it to a section of my previous colour, mixing it in with the paint that's still on my brush. I want this to be a slightly different tone, so I'm adding some more yellow to it. I then also want to stick with that sort of earthy colour and give it a more burnt-like hue. So I'm going to be adding a tiny little bit of blue, and I would only add a small amount at a time just so you can control the colour that you're making. Remember, if you ever mix up a colour that you don't like or you don't want to use, you don't have to use it. You can always wash your brush and start again. I've just added a bit more white and a little bit more yellow and a tiny dab of blue just to change this up slightly. And then whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and add this to your canvas using whatever shape or design that you want. I'm going to be leaving a small gap between this colour and my previous colour. Again, I'll go back in later with a slightly cooler tone to fill in that gap. As soon as you're happy, you can give your brush a wash, and I'm just going to go back to that very first colour that I had, that deep burnt orange shade. Just picking some up with my brush, I'm going to go back to that first shape and just re-go over that line so I've got a nice crisp edge where those two colours meet. I'll just blend it out. Next up, I would wash your brush and then you can go in with your cooler tones. So I'm just picking up some of this light olive colour and I'm going to be adding this to the top section of my canvas. Again, I'm going to be really careful as I bring this up to meet my other shade. If you want to, you can always dry your painting very lightly with a hairdryer on a very low heat. This will help speed up the process. And if you need to, you can add a little bit of water to your paint just to help it ease onto the canvas. As I bring this paint colour up to meet my previous colour, I like to push the bristles of the brush down onto the canvas, let the bristles fan out, and it helps you get a nice crisp edge as you bring this colour down to meet your previous shade. Mixing up the next colour, I'm going to start with white as my base, adding some of this light olive, and then I'm going to add a little bit of the blue and give that a good mix. I'm going to go ahead and add this in one of the other gaps that I've left, just being careful to paint it right in the middle before I then bring it up to meet both of the other shades. Again, I like to push the bristles of the brush down, let the bristles fan out, and then if you just drag the paintbrush along, it just gives you a nice crisp edge with your paint. If you need to, you can always swap over to a different brush if you prefer to use a smaller brush to get into all of the nooks and crannies, then feel free to do so. Moving on to my last shade, I'm just going to mix that up now. So I want to add quite a lot of yellow. I've run out of yellow on my palette, so I'll be adding a bit more in a moment. But I'm just going to start by mixing what I've got left here in with the colour that I just used. Again, you can feel free to mix up any tone that you want for this. I'm sticking with slightly cooler tones, but I'm just adding a little bit more yellow to my palette and then mixing it in to give it a slightly brighter feel. And then I'm going to pick up my tiny paintbrush because the line I'm filling in is very small. I'll just go ahead and spend some time just filling this in, just like we've been doing with the others, but you can just have a little bit more control if you've got a smaller gap by using the smaller paintbrush. When you've filled in all of your background, we're just going to wash off our brushes and move them to the side. I'm now just going to show you a couple of different options when it comes to drawing in and painting in our face. So I've got a spare bit of paper here and a pencil and also a black Sharpie pen. So this is the fun bit because we want to be really abstract and free. So the first idea I have is that you use your dominant hand. So I'm using my right hand, but I'm not going to lift the pencil off the paper, and I'm just going to start creating very loose face-like shapes. So I've got the eye there, bringing down to a random nose, adding in some lips, and then sort of chin going back up, adding in an ear, maybe even a hat, keeping it very loose and very abstract and very Picasso. You can then go in and add any more details you want. So I've just drawn in an eye, you could always pop in an earring or extra hair or anything else that you want, and that's one way of doing it. The other option is use your other hand. So I'm swapping over to my left hand. This makes us sort of have less control with what we're doing and forces us to be a little bit more abstract. So if you want to, you can kind of keep the pencil or pen to the paper, or you can just kind of go with lifting it up as well, but just using your other hand. And that's another way of sort of creating this very abstract shaped face. And now for the next one, I'm going to show you with a Sharpie. I'm actually not going to look at the paper as I do this. So I'm not looking, I'm just kind of going with what I think I need to do. So adding lips, chin, an ear, swooping it back round for the head. And actually it looks quite cool and very Picasso-like. So the great thing about this is they come out different each time. You can practice it as much as you want. I then went ahead and drew this onto my canvas using a black Sharpie, and I'm just going to mix up a colour to paint over these lines. So I'm starting with some white as my base, and I'm adding a little bit of black to this just to make a dark grey colour, but you can use any colour that you want to draw over your lines. Just adding a small amount of water just to keep this nice and fluid. And then when it comes to drawing on, I'm going to use my smaller brush, so just picking up some of that paint. And this bit's really fun because you're just going over the lines that you've already drawn onto your canvas. And you can do these as thick as you like, but I try and keep to the lines that I've already drawn. The great thing about this painting is you can do it so many different times. Each outcome will be different. You could have a whole series of them on the wall together. And they look really effective. It's also a very mindful and relaxing piece of art to create because we're not trying to be too specific. We're actually trying to let go of control slightly and focus more on mark making and just letting our paintbrush in our hands do the work. You can let your brain float off and your mind wander, which can be very therapeutic. Just spend a moment covering up the lines with your paint colour of choice. To finish up, you can then add any extra details that you want to your painting. So I might add a couple of eyelashes coming out from each of the eyes. And I might also fill in one of the eyes as well, but it's totally up to you. And we're now coming to the end of our painting. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you all enjoyed that. If you like this video, then do give us a little thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to our channel where we bring you new art tutorials all the time so you can get creative from home. Thanks everyone. Bye.